Okay, so picture this with me. A 113-year-old courthouse in Reno, Nevada. Not exactly where you'd expect, like the story ripped straight out of Succession,
Yep.
right? But that's what we're diving into today. The Murdoch family, their media empire, and a battle for control that's got everyone talking.
And what's so captivating about this case, it goes way beyond your typical family feud, right? We're not talking about who gets the bigger yacht here. This is about who gets to control the narrative for millions of people through massive outlets like Fox News.
Yeah, it's like King Lear, but with cable news instead of the kingdom. And the characters, just as intriguing. So you've got Rupert Murdoch, the patriarch, 93 years old and still trying to call the shots.
Yeah.
His chosen heir, Lachlan Murdoch, a bit more on the conservative side, much like his father. But then you've got the other siblings, James, Prudence, Elizabeth, considered more liberal. And, well, let's just say they've got different ideas about the family business.
And that difference in ideology is huge, especially when you think about how Fox News has been this powerhouse in shaping political discourse, in the U.S. especially. So the big question becomes, what happens to Fox News if that control shifts away from Rupert and Lachlan?
Exactly, because this is bigger than just a family squabble. We're talking about potentially reshaping the media landscape as we know it. And the way they're fighting for control. Well, get ready to talk about dual-class share structures.
Yeah, it's a bit of Wall Street jargon, I'll admit. But basically, it's how the Murdochs, even though they own a pretty small percentage of the company's stock, still maintain a majority of the voting power. Think of it like having a super vote that outweighs everyone else's.
So they have a smaller piece of the pie, but they get to decide how the whole thing's sliced.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that is where James, Prudence, and Elizabeth are saying, hold on, this isn't right. They're arguing this structure gives Rupert and Lachlan an unfair advantage, that it silences the other shareholders.
A classic power struggle.
Yeah.
With that added dose of media influence for good measure.
Yeah.
And that's what's fascinating for all of us, right? How much sway should one family have over the news we consume?
It's a great question. And it's not just the Murdochs either. This whole debate about dual-class share structures, it's happening in other companies too. Look at Google. They've faced criticism for their own version of this, where the founders get way more voting power.
So it's a bigger conversation about corporate governance, whether these structures are fair to investors, to the public. But before we get too deep in the weeds of corporate law, let's bring it back to the Murdochs. What are the potential scenarios here, and what could they mean for Fox News?
So on the one hand, you have the status quo. If Rupert and Lachlan win, business as usual for Fox News. They keep their grip. Editorial direction probably stays the course.
And what does that look like in practice? Because Fox News is already a huge player in shaping conservative thought, political strategy, the whole nine yards. Could this solidify that influence even more?
It's definitely a possibility, but then on the other hand, you have the potential for a massive shift if James and his sisters get control. Imagine the headlines. Fox News gets a facelift. Murdoch siblings usher in a new era of news.
Okay, now I'm really interested. Let's unpack that possibility. If James takes the reins, does Fox News suddenly go from, like, Sean Hannity to Rachel Maddow overnight?
Well, probably not that drastic, but a change in leadership at that level, it could definitely mean a shift in editorial direction. Would they move away from that really hard-hitting, sometimes controversial style of opinion journalism that Fox News is known for?
Right.
Would they bring in new voices, maybe more centrist, even left-leaning? Who knows?
And don't forget about Fox News' audience.
Yeah.
Huge and loyal. They tune in specifically for that brand of news and commentary. How would they react to a change? Would they stick around? Would they jump ship to other networks? It's fascinating to think about.
It really is. And it speaks to the power of brand loyalty in a media world that's already so fragmented. If we take a step back, connect this to the bigger picture. I mean, this whole case raises questions about media consumption in general.
And what's wild is that no one really knows how this is going to play out. But we're talking potentially massive changes, media ownership, editorial direction, even political discourse. And it all comes back to this courtroom in Reno. It's like a real-life soap opera, but with the potential to impact millions.
You know, something else that really struck me about all of this was this quote from Michael Wolff, you know, the biographer who's really dug deep into the Murdochs.
Right.
He called Lachlan and James, quote, wannabe little kings. Kind of makes you wonder about their ambition.
Yeah, Wolf always with the sharp observations. But it does make you wonder how much of this whole battle is about legacy. These siblings stepping out from their father's shadow, trying to prove themselves, you know, And what about the political side of all this?
Hmm.
We're talking about a news organization that's been accused of influencing elections, setting agendas, shaping how people think about politics. It's huge.
Oh, absolutely. Fox News has played a huge part in making certain voices louder, certain viewpoints, especially on the right. Even a small shift in editorial direction could have a ripple effect, not just in the US, but globally.
It's a ton of responsibility for any one news organization, don't you think? How much influence should any one media outlet, no matter what they believe, really have in a democracy?
That's the question, isn't it? And it feels more and more relevant as we see more consolidation in media, fewer companies owning more outlets, maybe narrowing the perspectives, the voices that actually reach people.
And it's not even just about who owns what, right? You've got algorithms, social media, echo chambers, where people only see what already fits with what they think.
Exactly. Makes it harder and harder to even have nuanced, fact-based conversations about anything important these days. And that's where this Murdoch case, it really gets to the heart of it. It's about media ownership, editorial independence, and whether we even have a media ecosystem that's diverse and vibrant.
And these aren't just hypothetical questions. They have real-world consequences. Think about Fox News' coverage of climate change or the pandemic, how that's shaped public opinion, even influenced government policy.
Exactly. Media organizations have a huge impact on our lives, even if we don't always see it. We talk about media literacy, but this feels different, like societal level media literacy, understanding the forces at play, the biases, the agendas, all of it.
Which brings us back to that dual-class share structure, because this isn't just about the Murdochs, is it? This case could set a precedent for how other companies are run.
Absolutely. There's a growing movement against these types of structures. The argument is they give too much power to just a few people, and that goes against the idea of shareholder democracy.
Like that hedge fund, Starboard Value, the one that's been putting pressure on News Corp to get rid of their dual-class shares. They're saying this structure basically lets the Murdochs act like, well, emperors, not answering to anyone, even though they own a tiny fraction of the company.
And that argument has gotten some traction. Investors are wondering if these structures, even if they offer some stability in the short term, if they're actually good for long-term growth, for innovation. The argument is that companies with more diverse leadership, more voices at the table, they're more adaptable, more responsive, and ultimately more successful.
So it's not just about being fair, it's about good business practice.
Right.
But, I mean, the Murdochs aren't just going to give up control without a fight, right?
No, not a chance. This case is far from over. More legal back and forth, appeals, who knows what the judge will decide. But one thing's for sure. Whatever happens will have a ripple effect. Not just for Fox News, for the whole media landscape.
It's a good reminder that the news we get doesn't just appear, does it? It's shaped by all these things, families, power struggles, legal battles that go on for years.
Absolutely. And we have to navigate this media landscape. It changes constantly, but we have to stay informed, be critical, ask questions, and demand transparency from those who control so much of what we see and hear.
You know, it's funny, isn't it? We talk about legal battles and corporate jargon, but this whole thing really comes down to family. Even if family is as wealthy and powerful as the Murdochs, it's still messy. It's complicated.
Oh, absolutely. Shakespearean almost.
Right. And it's happening on a global stage, so those family dynamics could change how millions of people see the news. It's a lot.
It really is. And it makes you think, right? About inherited wealth, the struggle for power, what it means to carry a family name like that.
It's like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
But then there's the question of accountability, too. Should one family, no matter who they are, have that much control over the media? That's a question for the ages, really.
It is. And here we are in the 21st century still asking it, but with all this added complexity, globalization, social media, information overload, it's a whole different ballgame.
Right. And we're left trying to figure it all out. It feels like this Murdoch case, as crazy as it is, it's like a reminder that we can't just sit back and consume whatever's put in front of us.
Exactly. We have to be skeptical, question the narratives, look for different perspectives, and demand more transparency from the people who, frankly, hold the reins of media power.
It's on us, isn't it? To be smarter, to be more critical, to engage more thoughtfully with the news and information that, let's face it, shapes our world.
It really is. And as we wrap up, this legal battle will end eventually. A judge will make a ruling, maybe some appeals, and things quiet down. But the bigger issues here, they'll stick around. Media ownership, influence, responsibility, these things matter.
It's a conversation we have to keep having as consumers, as citizens. Because what happens to the news, it might just determine what happens to our democracy, too.